So good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Chanales, and as mentioned by Ms. Sean, I'm a Supervising Science Research Specialist from the Food Quality and Safety section. We know that DOST-FNRI is the lead agency in food and nutrition research, and it aims to continue and develop and enhance nutrition tools that aim at improving the quality of life of Filipinos. And one of these known tools is the Philippine FCP, which is widely used by most of us here in this forum, lalo na for the dietary intake, assessment, nutrition education, and developing of nutrition-related tools, and for planning and planning of some of our interventions and diets. The statement of McCann and Widdowson from 1940s, which is a knowledge of the chemical composition of foods, is the first and essential dietary treatment of diseases or in any quantitative study of human and nutrition. I know for most of us still believes and holds true for this statement up to this point. We know that this data is very vital, lalo na yung quality ng data, yung quantity, at saka yung accessibility ng data, lalo na sa ating mga nagtatrabaho in nutrition and allied professional fields. To define, food composition tables and databases is a general repository of food component or nutrient data. It is also defined as a scientific tool or nutrition tool used as the basis for human nutrition and health studies. It is created on a country-by-country basis, which describes the nutritional and chemical information of their commonly consumed foods. And for here in the Philippines, the USC-FNRI is the only data generator and compiler of the Philippine FCP. Some of the known uses of the Philippine FCTs are generally used primarily for the assessment of nutrient intakes and also for planning, advising, or prescribing food and nutrient intakes. In both cases, for the assessment and planning, mas madalas ginagamit siyang approach in a group rather than individuals. Also, the FCT and FCT databases are used for national and food and nutrition policies, lalo na po sa ating mga agriculturists when they plan their production. Also, it is used as one of the tools for the nutrition intervention programs and also for planning the diets. And lastly, it is used in nutrition education, lalo na po sa mga nag-aaral ng nutrition and food science. Some of the known limitations of FCTs and food composition databases are the following. First, we know that foods are biological in nature and exhibit variation significantly because of their environmental, genetic, and processing influence. So, environmental, kung ano yung type ng soil sila tinanim, yung climate, kung saan galing yung pagkain. Also, yung genetic composition din nila. Also, variations then from the storage condition, processing condition din, lalo na sa mga semi-processed food. And also yung sa iba naman, sa cultivars din, nagbabari, at saka sa animals naman, yung iba't ibang klase ng breeds. So, each country has its own consumption pattern din. So, yung mga nire-report sa kanilang FCD databases ay nagbabago din, ay iba-iba per country. So, may possible na kinakain dito sa bansa, itong halaman na to ay kinakain dito sa isang lugar na to. Meanwhile, ito naman ay hindi kinakain sa ibang lugar. So, each country may kanya-kanya silang consumption pattern, which results in country-specific foods or recipes or developed brand name or foods. Also, in the advent of the food biodiversity, it highly influences the food composition of food. So, nutrient values may vary up to 1,000 times among different varieties of the same food. So, particularly, lalo na sa mga familiar dun sa carrots, merong mga matitingkad, at medyo yung iba, merong medyo mapusyaw lang. So, mostly their micronutrients, particularly yung beta-carotene nila, nagbabago or magkakaiba. So yun, napaka-diverse ng mga pagkain natin, and yun nga, lalo na yun sa mga trace or micro minerals nila or micronutrients nila, nagbabago talaga sila or magkakaiba talaga sila. With the number of data that being generated by countries or by different regions, I think pwede tayong kumuha ng mga data from the published and other food composition databases. But still, sa dami po niya, lahat ng mga experts all over the world, I think naisip din na dapat merong isang nag-harmonize ng mga activities din natin. Thus, the International Organization of Food Composition Program was established by the FAO. So the FAO established the InFoods system, or the International Network of Food Data Systems. So it was established in 1984, and it is a worldwide network of food composition experts that aims to improve the quality, availability, reliability, and use of the food composition data. So their main activities includes the development of technical food composition guidelines and standards, assistance to regional data centers and individual countries in developing their own FCTs and FCDBs, and publication of Journal of Food Composition and Analysis. So most of the food composition data activities by FNRI is aligned with the InFoods guidelines or network system, network guidelines, mga guidelines ng InFoods. InFoods is also organized into several regional data centers. So all over the world, we have 18 InFoods regional and sub-regional data centers. So si Philippine FCT is kabilang sa ASEAN Foods, which is currently headed by Thailand as our regional country coordinator. So the goal and objective of ASEAN Foods are aligned with those of InFoods po. So they aim to strengthen the development of national and regional food composition data with quality and adequate quantity and accessibility to the users in ASEAN and other regions. So recently, yung mga efforts ni ASEAN Foods and the Asian Pacific Food Analysis Network, or si AFPAN, which is currently headed by the Oceania Foods or the Australia, nagjo-join forces sila in developing guidelines and system for us, the data generator and compiler, be able to adapt with the changes and be able to provide quality data. So yun yung mostly na ginakandak ng ASEAN Foods and AFPAN. So si ASEAN Foods more on the compilation part, and also for the development of or assisting some of our member nations na makadevelop ng kanilang food composition databases, while si AFPAN more on the quality or the interlaboratory upgrading or interlaboratory quality assurance system, or for the food analysis. So for the method development, and also for the some of the latest advances for the food analysis. So the recent activities of ASEAN Foods is recently lang tinulungan nila ang Lao PDR na ma-develop ang kanilang sariling FCT. So with that, based on the InFoods, most of the input composition databases nowadays have the following data. First is the direct data, which is based on the chemical or nutrient analysis. Kaya pansin nyo kanina, partner ni ASEAN Foods kanina si AFPAN, which is yun yung mostly ang focus ni AFPAN, which is to improve the quality of the data generated in the laboratories. Also in the indirect data naman, which is from the other sources or published literatures and journals. So we know that direct data are preferable, but involves a huge amount of investment in terms of financial resources and manpower and other utilities. So yan din, same with the food na nagbabago yung kanyang some of the components of the food due to some biodiversity and genetic or other geographical variations. same then with our methods of analysis in the lab, nagbabago din siya. So, we have to adapt with the ever-changing advances in the analytical methods. Indirect data offers already an alternative for food composition data compilation. So, these indirect data naman are napaka-useful din in building up the food composition tables. However, when we do the indirect compilation or data compilation, it needs a lot of scrutiny and lot of several quality concerns din po when we use this indirect data. So hindi lang yung necessarily we just adapt it readily. So we have to check also the nutrients that we see from the food, other literatures in terms of their moisture and also their fat and other macronutrients adaptation. So most of the food composition database uses the combination of these indirect and direct data, which parang pinagsasama natin ang original analytical data together with the values taken from other databases. So as a screenshot from the indirect data compilation or the compilation, we use several guidelines for the food matching and also for the compilation tool na makikita rin natin sa input guidelines and several checking of the food data sources. Meanwhile, sa direct data generation, we do the sampling, the documentation, the sample and preparation, then all of the samples na we collected, we make sure na we analyze it for moisture first. Then we do all the chemical extraction and do the analysis. So when we gather all the data source, the following are the stages in food composition data where the data source are being combined, lahat siya from the analytical data, from the food matching data namin, and yung mga other food composition databases. So most of the time, ang ginagawa sa Philippine food composition data, yung mga important food items sa Philippines, ay yun ang ina-analyze natin, and yung mga least important ay yun yung mostly na hinahanapan natin ng values from using the indirect data. Then we have the archival database, then the reference database where with the calculation and estimation and evaluation from the indirect data or adaptation to fat content of Philippine FCT food items were done. And also from some of the computations on checking of the vitamin A towards retinol activity equivalent were also checked and done. And also for as reference for the final user database na usually, ito na po yung nakikita natin in a book or in online. But first, before we introduce the updated Philippine FCT, medyo throwback muna tayo. Kailan pa ba nag-start si Philippine FCT? So I think most of us hindi pa pinapanganak or baka panahon na ng ating mga grandparents. 1951 ang kauna-unahang Philippine FCT. So ito yung picture niya. It's just a small handbook. Sobrang small and I think FNRI na lang ang meron nito sa kanyang library. It composes of 383 food items and also includes local and scientific and English names of each food edible portion, food energy, proximate composition. It has 3 minerals then and 5 vitamins. So it was pioneered by Dr. Carmen Intengnan of the Institute of Nutrition pa noon, ang FNRI, way back sa Heran or sa UP Manila. Then in 1957, naglabas ng food composition tables ulit, which is the revised edition of the 1951 that includes from 300 plus food items to 700 food items siya. And it included local, scientific, and English names of each food. May edible portion na rin siya, food energy, proximate composition, 5 minerals, and 5 vitamins. So, Institute of Nutrition pa rin noon si FNRI, and yun, from Dr. Intengnan, it was published by, still published by Dr. Intengnan. And some of the nutrients here or some of the minerals here are from the studies of Dr. Camara and Besa in Bataclan in 1952. Our next edition of the Philippines FCT is around 1968. So it included 963 food items and retained the 1957 food components. And yan, in-update nila ang database in terms of the amino acid composition of the Philippine plants. So, and also some of the moisture and calcium and oxalic acid of some Philippine plants. And also it is one of the first FCTs with glossary and glossary of local food names. And also this version of the FCT na this edition of FCT na to ay merong 5 dialects. So hindi lang siya English and Tagalog. And in 1980s, this edition of the book includes the beta-carotene and also the table for the some of the anti-nutrients such as some of the tables for fighting total phosphorus, calcium content of foods. And some of the minerals are also provided. Then in 1990s, it is na-incorporate yung data quality features or na first na ni-launch ni InFood Guidelines. So, ni-revise yung 1980 and chinek yung data quality features ng InFood. So, dito kasi nag-start yung mga on how they are going to yun sa mga values on how are they going to report it, scientific names na reporting included dito sa version na to. And also, some of the data quality features of InFood's guidelines were also adapted in this edition. So also the first volume then na computerized, and it is the physiologic energy factors for calculating energy values were also done, and factors for calculating protein from nitrogen using the factors are also included here, and also the new food index of English and Filipino names were also seen here in this edition. And yung I think mostly nakagamit pa rin ang mga participants natin, including myself, lalo na nung nag-aaral din ako, is the 1997 Philippine FCT. Actually, during my first work din, gamit na gamit ko tong si 1997 FCT. With this FCT, it is harmonized with the ASEAN foods kung saan din naging active din si ASEAN foods sa ating region. So, additional food items were analyzed and collected using the ASEAN food sampling guidelines na usually na ginagamit pa rin ngayon. And the methods of analysis and calculation were presented in this book. And now, the latest version or the updated version of the Philippine Food Composition Tables is the 2019, which is composed of 34,601 nutrient data with 1,542 food items, 23 food components, and 17 food groups, with the addition of 6 new food components like the total sugar, sodium, cholesterol, saturated, monounsaturated, and polysaturated fatty acids. And also this edition of the book includes the total dietary fiber, vitamin A retinol activity equivalent, we also replaced the crude fiber and the vitamin A retinol equivalent respectively. So some of the features of the Philippine FCT 2019 na I think kasi most of us, diretso na agad tayo dun sa main data without checking the other parts of the Philippine FCT book. So in this forum, I guess medyo i-browse natin siya paunti-unti. So it has an explanatory notes. So some of the brief information on how we generate the food data and compile the data ay nandito po. Also, some of the major food groups and codings. If you have major food groups in mind, baka or subgroupings na in mind, you can check this with our table for major food grouping and food codes and food types, which is makikita sa explanatory notes of the book. Also, some of the information on how we generate the nutrients using the methods, kung ano yung methods of analysis na ginamit namin or calculation for that certain nutrient, I also included in the explanatory notes. and also the modes of expression. And also we, as part of the in-foods guidelines, we have to also to include the in-foods tag name just for data interchange then in preparation for data interchange. So when we define ASH, for example here, or FIBDTG for the total dietary fiber, it holds true for some of the members of the in-foods. Pag nakita nila FIBDTG, we note that it is a total dietary fiber. So the layout of the Philippine FCT. So compared with the previous layout, so we opted to put lines so para medyo madali siyang makita. And yun nga po, we have the food ID, food description, scientific name, and the alternate or common names, the edible portion, and the 23 nutrient and food nutrient or food component. Also, the latter part of the book, which includes the appendices, where we included the niacin values from tryptophan, also some generated values or analyzed values of potassium and zinc values can be shown also for some of the selected food items at the appendices, and also some of the fatty acid profile of some of the analyzed our selected food items that we analyze. Also in the appendices, we also checked and updated the glossary terms. Also, the food index can be seen also at the latter part of the book, where you can see the food ID, food description, food group, data source, and the page number. So I think for those users in 1997, dito rin tayo unang tumitingin while we check yung some of our food items. So as a reminder po, for the food codes or our food ID for this and our FCT, we term it as a food ID. We use the alpha codes, which refers to the letter assigned to the particular food group, while the numeric code is the numerical chronological order within the food group. Food ID already assigned to a particular food should remain and cannot be reassigned to other foods even if the original item has been rendered obsolete. So we just, hindi na namin pwedeng na-assign na namin food ID sa kanya rather than parang identifying niya yon. So hindi siya pwedeng palitan lalo na kapag na-obsolete na siya. So para sa kanya lang yan. Food ID also, yun po. As a reminder, it is already assigned to a particular food ID and should remain. So as you can see, pag nagdagdag kami ng bagong analyzed food item, we follow the last number, pero ang pagkaka-arrange pa rin namin ay alphabetized. For the food groupings, still we follow the ASEAN food or the ASEAN food groupings pa rin. So we have 17 food groups, which is alam natin sa A, cereals and products. B, which is categories for starchy roots and tubers and products. C, nuts, dried beans and seeds and products. D, for the vegetables. E, for the fruits and products, meats and other animals and products. For F, and G, for finfish, eggs and products. For H, tapos J for milk, fats and oils, K, and sugar and confectionery and condiments, M and N respectively. So also we have some alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, and some of our analyzed and combination foods and commercial baby foods and miscellaneous. Also, as a reminder, the nomenclature and description, this include the food naming, food description, and food classification and coding. These parameters are mandatory as they provide identity for a specific food. So, yun, scientific names then are generally important when we look into our foods for precise data and identification and data interchange. That's why in our updating of FCT, we make sure that we update or we check if it's still that item holds that scientific name. So we consulted it with the experts from National Museum, BFAR, Bureau of Plant Industry, Philippine Rice Research Institute, Institute of Plant Breeding in UPLB, and also from the from the Institute of Human and Food Nutrition, also in UPLB. So we also check the scientific names from authoritative sources and taxonomic databases such as the Signing Finder, Plants Database, and other sources din. So as an example, for the Yacon tubero, we describe the food name as this, with the food ID, scientific name, and their alternate name. So from some of the processed food also, we abbreviated some of their description from the food name, but included the scientific name. So we hold, and also the alternate name. And as a reminder, from some of the abbreviations shown here in the FCT can be found also in the explanatory notes. Also, the components and convention and expression were followed followed namin din sa inputs guidelines, where all the nutrient and component of Philippine FCT data were expressed per 100 gram edible portion, which is the common denominator for all FCTs and FCD databases. So for each nutrient or component have the following decimal places. So example, for cholesterol, whole number siya. Sa vitamin C, whole number din siya. And for the protein, meron siyang 1 decimal place after the period, one significant 1 decimal places. And for the edible portion, take note, it consists of the parts of the food items that are eaten, cooked, or preserved. So the laboratory generated the edible portion from a series of measurements, several number of weighings, and several recording of the refuse and the edible portion. Also, some of the reminders, for the information from the sampling procedure that we use the ASEAN Food Data System Guidelines, ASEAN Food Data Guidelines, where samples were taken from 10 collection points, generally in supermarkets, grocery, or wet markets located in the east, west, north, and south sections of Metro Manila, where we presume that these are the distribution areas from mostly of our foods commonly consumed. Some of the details or categorization of our nutrient and food components. So we term the water, energy, in kcal, using total carbohydrate by difference, protein, total fat, total carbohydrate, and ash as proximate. Meanwhile, the other carbohydrates included dito ang total dietary fiber and total sugars. And the minerals, which is known as the calcium, included dito ang calcium, phosphorus, iron, and sodium. And for the vitamins, we have the fat and the water-soluble vitamins. Mostly for the water-soluble vitamins are the B vitamins and with the vitamin C. And the fat-soluble vitamins, currently, we have only vitamin A and beta-carotene. For the lipids, we categorize it for the 3 major fatty acid group. So the saturated, monounsaturated, and the polyunsaturated fatty acid. And lastly, the sterol or the animal sterol, the cholesterol. So for information, the nutrient values were presumed as 0 in this food composition table, particularly the total dietary fiber, in which 0 siya for the single animal foods. Also, the retinol in single plant foods were presumed as 0. Beta-carotene in white and very light-colored single or combination foods were also presumed as 0. And also, cholesterol in single plant foods are 0 then. And the ascorbic acid in single in single, raw, processed animal foods, combination foods, dried beans, cooked, and canned fish, and unless fortified ay zero din. And also yung fatty acids natin, when fat content is less than or equal to 0.5% of their fat, the results obtained were below the detection limit na zero po siya. So, for the Philippine FCT 2019, the group planned, hopefully it will be released soon, the Philippine Food Composition Tables User's Guide, where you can use this to help FCT familiarize more and understand the Philippine FCT handbook and for the appropriate use of some Philippine FCT data. So it will serve as a guide based dito sa current na publication ng 2019. So the Philippine Users Guides includes the following parts. So chapter 1 then for the description of the parts and features of the 2019 updated Philippine FCT. Also the proper use section where also can also be seen in the User's Guide. And some of the limitations and common errors, including their examples, are also given here. And lastly, some of the field factors that we generated from our laboratory will also be included in the Philippine User's Guide. So some of the sample exercises and for us to be able to check if we have understood the User's Guide or the book, meron din itong kasama. And also for the information din po of our attendees here, our online database din is currently available din po for those na hindi maka-access po ng food. If you have internet connection po, you can access also our data at the PhilFCT under FNRI network. So the web-based Philippine FCT, ito yung ang additional features niya includes the photo documentation for each food item. For each food item, pan-checking the nutrient. So currently, so yun, pwede nyo, pag available po yung photo for that certain food item, pwede nyo po siya ma-access or click. And also, this data can also be printed in PDF form together with your per single food item. So, ito po yung sample ng printed form when you access the PhilFCT database online. So, libre po siya. You can access it anytime. So, before I end, I would like to acknowledge po the Philippine FCT project team together with Ms. Rina Rodriguez, Alexandra David, Maria Alisa Bailosis, Jem Serrano, Arisindag, and all to all our Philippine FCT compilers and data generators and simula ng Food Composition Data Program. Maraming salamat po, and I hope you learn from this webinar po. Thank you and have a blessed day ahead.
Thank you. Let's give a virtual clap po to Ms. Tin Nacionales for her very detailed presentation po on FCT. So she gave us po overview on the Philippine Food Composition Table, its history po. Nakita po natin yung mga sinuunang FCT na I guess most of us dito ay hindi na po naabutan. And kung ano po yung naging difference ng old FCT sa new FCT po. So now we are ready po to take your questions. So you can type your questions po sa chat box and we will answer it po. Ms. Tin, again, yung number one question po, no? So where can we buy po the new FCT po?
We can buy po the Philippine FCT na updated po through ipopost namin yung details. Sa FNRI po siya. So we can arrange po the delivery po then just in case po na medyo malayo po yung lugar nyo. And yun po, may contact details po kami bibigay po. Mostly sa ngayon po sa FNRI pa lang siya available, but we are hoping na ma-launch siya, I think sa Shopee or Lazada soon.
Okay, so sana Ms. Tin, no? Kasi mas accessible sa lahat. Ms. Tin, may tanong po tayo. Yun daw po bang FCT value sa IFNRI is based on the 2019 FCT?
Yes, if may mga hindi lang na bago during the I think online kasi yun yung mas continuous na nababago just in case na may mga recent updates kami. But at this point, halos similar sila kasi hindi ko siya masabi na 100% kasi naman, pag online, may mga discrepancies minsan kasi din. So, yun. But most of the 2019 data, nandun po siya sa online.
Okay. And then yung other question, yung user's guide naman daw po ng FCT work.
Ayun po. So, currently po, ready na po siya for copyright and hopefully po, bago mag-end ng year, maging available po siya. Since
is the FCT user's guide po will also be available in IFNRI po?
I think some of the parts of the dun sa information, ang user's guide naka-upload na rin po ngayon sa ating website. Check nyo lang so po yung information doon or about.
Okay, so you can check po through IFNRI kung malayo po kayo. So mahirapan po yung shipping. Pwede naman po through the IFNRI website. And then Ms. T, another question po from Ms. Gonzalez. Are essential oils part of the miscellaneous food group?
Yun lang po. Most of the oils lang po na commonly na kinokonsume natin or edible oils po, meron po tayong food category for our oils lang po. So I think nandun po siya. I do not know particularly what essential oil po yung inyo pong hinahanap, but mostly yung ating commonly edible oils po, nandun po sa oil category po ng ating FCT.
Okay, thank you po, Ms. Tin. So we have another question po. My current research is focused on trans fat intake. Mm-hmm. Kailan po kaya mai-include ang trans fat sa ating FCT?
So currently ongoing ang generation ng trans fatty acid. However, it is kaka-start lang halos din niya last year. So medyo marami yung aming, dahil pandemic din, hirap din mag-sampling actually. So may mga factors, but we are trying our best na matapos po ito ang trans fat together with our service laboratory group by this year. And yun po, hopefully maging available din po siya soon. But a target namin actually by next year kasi yun din ang aim din po namin. Yan. Hopefully ma-upload po natin yung analyzed na trans fats po. Kasi ang difference po niya with we know that trans fat kasi mostly sa processed foods talaga siya eh. Yun. So, in terms of the raw foods lang, as is lang, medyo yun, unless known siya na meron doon. So, yun, medyo critical or pinag-aaralan mabuti ni FNRI through enhancing their analytical method then before we publish it. Thank you.
So another question, Ms. Tin, a curiosity question. What was the rationale for the 100-gram value basis again? I understand this is an international standard too. I ask this due to the fact that food items are consumed differently in terms of amounts.
Yun po. So, as mentioned po kanina, yung 100 grams per edible portion po talaga yung standard na sinusunod for most of the food composition databases. I guess some of the databases ngayon available yung per serving sizes nila. But this part of the determining kung ilan yung serving sizes nila, yun naman po yung saan may integrate si food exchange list naman natin or yung other nutrition tools natin. So kasi it depends po sa gagamit din po kasi yun. Pero the generic for the for the harmonization and comparability of mas madali kasi siyang i-compare. Kunyari, din, di ba? FCT data for, kunyari, vitamin C level ng orange natin na fruit dito ay parehas ba or halos similar ba pag pumili ka sa China. So, for isang at a glance, kita mo agad siya.
Okay, so for comparability with other sources. And then tayo din po mga ND, for example, you want to know na ano yung mas mataas yung vitamin C content, yung orange ba o yung papaya o yung rambutan ba o yung manga. So, madali natin siya maka-compare as per 100 gram basis. And if you attended po the FEL webinar last week, it was mentioned po by Ms. Santos that all the computation po from the FEL is based on the values generated po by the food composition. Okay? So another question po, can we use the PhilFCT po for nutrient content of baked goods? Let's say a bakery owner wants to compute for the nutrient content of her products. Or should she seek the service of a laboratory? Thank you.
Yan naman po, for estimation of how much naman yung binake na product, you can use the menu evaluation guide where naka-integrate din si FCT. Ibang usapan po yung kapag ibebenta mo na yung iyo with the package. So yun yung kailangan mo ng service laboratory kasi you have to get the FDA requirement then ng certificate of product registration, which is included yung nutrition facts niya, which needs service of a laboratory. But
Yes,
if you want only to just check the how much yung estimated nung na-bake mo na product, you can use the menu evaluation tool po natin na also available sa FNRI.
Okay, so tama po, no? So if you want to sell your product, hindi po tayo basta pwedeng mag-compute sa FCT and ilagay po natin dun sa product na yun at sabihin po natin na yun yung nutrition facts. So it requires po laboratory analysis for us to bear a nutrition facts and also FDA approval po. And then po yung Menu Eval Plus po, meron din po tayong webinar na ginawa dyan I think last April or May po. Available din po sa aming YouTube channel. You can watch it anytime. If we have professors here or teachers who are attending this webinar, you can share it to your class po for them to watch and learn how to use the Menu Evaluation Plus software po of FNRI. Okay? So any plans po na isama yung nutrition facts ng mga supermarket items such as biscuit, juices, and even fast food items? I think ito din po yung question last week kay Ms. Noel kung sa fast food pwede daw po isama.
Actually, ito yung aming pinaghahandaan together with the project lead of the PDRI, si Carl. So yun, we have several talks po with the some of our lead agency who handles po the nutrition labels po ng ating mostly branded and processed food. We are hoping po na for the purpose of research, maibigay po or mapahiram po nila sa amin yun. And we can, I think, share it po. Pero yun nga po, medyo mahaba pa yung pagdadaanan. But we really wanted to have it then. Siyempre, the more data that we have, mas madali po yung ating trabaho din. So yun, kasama po yan sa plans po namin together with our PDRI group. Kasi maraming tools ngayon na dinedevelop si FNRI na it will be not only the nutritional content of the raw foods but also the processed foods.
Okay, so thank you. Noted po dyan, Ms. Tin. Next po, may plan po ba to include amino acids sa FCT? Maging useful po ito for the nutritional management of inborn errors of metabolism like MSUD.
Actually, napaka-timing po na inyong question, ma'am. Currently, the food data generation or the food quality safety session has a project on the amino acid data generation po. However po, we are currently, ngayon kasi dumating yung mga bagong equipment and yan po, ina-establish na po namin or nagbabalidate po kami ngayon ng method for amino acids. And hopefully, test po namin itong method for some of the selected food items. I think kung sa inborn error of metabolism, I think magiging useful po as our basis for priority na i-analyze po for amino acid ay ito po. So, thank you po for that information, ma'am. And hopefully, ma'am, after next year, meron ng data namin.
Okay.
Next year po.
Kasi transplant next year.
Oo, kasi
amino acid yun.
Medyo na po. Konti lang po kasi kami din po sa lab. Thank you very much po.
Thank you. Yes po. Miss Tia, another question. Can we still use the 1997 user's guide?
Yes po. Up to this point po, you can still use it. Pati yung examples po doon, yun nga lang po, when you refer to that user's guide, make sure na meron ka ring hawak ng 1997 na FCT kasi some of their examples po ay nakabase po doon. But the principles and the guide, I think mostly naman still holds true pa rin po for that book po. You can still use it po.
So, Miss Ting, hindi po pwede na 1997 user's guide, tapos 2019 yung
ano po, for some of the
FCT.
examples, kasi di ba may mga ano, pero parehas, pwede mo siyang gamitin kay 2019 for some. Parang i-check mo lang din if, teka, baka mali, kasi baka mamaya hanapin mo yung example na food, yung kunyari, example ng food na yun, tapos wala sa 1997, wala sa 2019. Kasi, take note, meron kami sa 2019 na some of the obsolete food items ay may mga tinanggal dito kami as part of our quality evaluation po.
Okay. So, pero Miss Tin, yung mga conversion factors doon, same lang for 1997 user's guide and the 2019 user's guide na ilalabas po ni FNRI po.
I think magkakaroon lang some of the introduction on the retinol activity equivalent kasi mostly wala siya sa 1997. So yun po yung medyo abangan natin. However, while waiting po, you can still check po yung mga conversion factors, particularly sa vitamin A for retinol equivalent, RE, RAA, tsaka yung sa beta-carotene po.
Okay, noted po dyan, Ms. Tin. So sana nasagot po yung mga questions na ating students with regards to that. So do we have any more questions po from the chat box? Ms. Tin, yung ano na lang, details na lang kung saan sila mag-order, siguro pwedeng ilagay po sa chat box. Kung nalagay na po.
Okay po.
Yes po. Thank you po. So on that note, we are ending this open forum, Ms. Tin. So let me award po your, let me share my screen for the certificate of appreciation. So let me read the citation. So Department of Science and Technology, Food and Nutrition Research Institute presents this certificate of appreciation to Ms. Christine B. Nationales for sharing her valuable knowledge as research person during the webinar on the new food composition tables held on September 17, 2021 via Zoom, signed by Dr. Imelda Angeles Agdepa. Thank you po, Ms. Tin. So let's give Ms. Tin a virtual round of applause for her lecture on FCT. And I know you will all agree with me that we learned a lot today, especially po dun sa ating mga students na kasama natin na umattend po ng webinar na ito. So thank you po, Ms. Tin.
Salamat Ms. and sa TDS-TSD, congratulations din. And sa lahat po na nag-attend, thank you very much po.
Okay, thank you po. So now, we go now to our reminders on how you can avail po your certificates for this webinar. We would like to remind everyone po na you can rewatch this webinar via our YouTube page. So again, kung meron po kayong mga teacher dyan or students, you can use po the YouTube channel of FNRI. Madami po kaming webinars doon na maybe you can share with your students po. Okay, so let me read po a few reminders. Okay, again, please provide your PRCID number and PRCID expiration date in your iTrain account. You can edit your account through the profile button at the upper, through the edit account button at the upper left corner of the iTrain website. So the profile button requires you to fill up all the needed information po. So pag hindi nyo pa na-fill up lahat, kung lagi po kayong bumabalik doon, that means po meron po kayong na-miss out. And then pag na-fill out na po lahat, and then pwede po kayo mag-log out, and then i-try nyo po ulit mag-login para ma-access nyo po ulit siya. Okay, please also edit your name in the account. Please note that the name you enter in the account will be reflected in your certificates. And then we will post po the attendance sheet link. So it will be posted po in our chat box now. So please click the attendance sheet link provided in the Zoom chat box. So please accomplish the attendance sheet and provide the correct email address po. Correct meaning hindi po all caps. Tama po ang spelling. Yung at gmail.com may dot po. Yung yahoo.com may dot. Maging careful po tayo kasi minsan po nagkakamali po kayo ng type ng inyong email. So ang nangyayari po, pag in-upload sa website, hindi po nababasa ng system na kayo po yung nag-attend ng webinar na po ito. So again po, if you fail to provide the correct email address, the system will not be able to process your certificate. So again po, no? So please provide the correct email address and remember po kung ano po yung email na ginamit nyo sa IFNRI or ITIN registration. Para po makakuha po kayo ng certificate of participation for this webinar. Again, it can only be accessed po through laptop and desktop and not through cell phones or tablets. Okay? So, when can you take the post-test and evaluation form? So, you can take it at 1 p.m. po. So, please log in your ITIN account at 1 o'clock p.m. and answer the post-test and feedback form. You can click the profile button and answer. So, if you go to the iTrain, you go to the profile button and then you take pre-test, take post-test, and then after that, magiging take evaluation siya. And then after you take evaluation, magiging get certificate na siya. So you can now download your certificate. Okay, so after answering the post-test and evaluation, you can now download your certificate under the profile button. Okay. So before we end, let me thank everyone who joined us since the start of this webinar series, since noong August 23 po, lahat po ng sumali. Thank you very much po for joining us. So for the 4 webinars, okay? The ITIN website was published in 2018 to serve as a platform from the online and offline training services of DOST-FNRI. Since 2018, the Institute had been offering webinar through iTrain. Thus, when the pandemic hits po, we are very happy that from just 20 participants who are joining our webinar, we are now 100. So right now, we are about 295 in this webinar. Okay. With the use of iTrain website, enrollment and issuance of certificates for webinar participants is more easy. Thus, we are asking for your help to improve the iTrain website. So we understand po na there are still glitches or meron pa po kaming mga kailangan i-improve sa system. And we are taking note of that and we will do our best to improve the system po of how we take pre-test, on how you join the webinar, on how you can download your certificate. Thus, please answer our beta testing questionnaire posted in our chat box. So kung hindi nyo pa po siya na-answeran through the previous 3 webinars, you can answer it and help us improve the website. And we also invite you po to attend another webinar which will happen on September 24th at 2 o'clock p.m. again through the ITIN website. The webinar is entitled Munting Espasyo sa Bakuran, Pakinabangan, Edible Landscaping, Sana All Subukan. This is in partnership with the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So they will have a webinar po on edible landscaping. So ganun pa rin po yung process natin for this webinar. So you will enroll through iTrain, you will answer the pre-test, and then you can download the certificate through the iTrain website. Okay. So again, thank you for joining us this morning. We hope that you learned a lot from this webinar series. And see you on September 24 for our webinar on edible landscaping. And then thank you and have a good day and stay safe. Again po, please accomplish the attendance sheet, provide the correct email address, and the attendance sheet will close po as soon as this Zoom meeting room closed po. So pag nagsara na po yung Zoom meeting room natin, sarado na din po yung ating attendance sheet. So please answer it now po, yung attendance sheet po natin. Thank you po for joining us this morning po.
Thank you po.
Thank you po, Miss Tin.
Ingat po.
na may bagong gabay para sa lakas at kalusugan mo.